Today on the PitchBook podcast, we have motivational speaker Casey Hermansen, who is pitching The Impossible First by Colin O'Brady. Batter up! Zach, tell me, you got to tell me about dinner the other night, because I heard from your wife that something hilarious happened. So tell us about it, Zach.
We had our 2022 year anniversary. I think that the math is right.
You look confident.
I think the math is right. I'm tensing up a little bit, but I think the math is right. Okay. We went to dinner, and we try to do. Usually, we're eating at Chick-fil-A or McDonald's. So once a year, I figure we got to go big. So we went to this nice restaurant in Park City. We're eating dinner, and we were talking about the podcast. And I said, it would be nice to do some women biographies. I was like Amelia Earhart or Helen Keller. And at that moment, our waiter walks by and he goes, "Helen Keller?" I'm like, "Yeah, Helen Keller." He says, "I saw Helen Keller 10 years ago and he was so good on stage." And I'm like, "You mean Helen Keller, the deaf blind girl?" He's like, "No, Helen Keller, the speaker guy. He tells American stories." I'm like, "No, Helen Keller was deaf and blind,
and is also a woman,
and is a woman." Yeah, he's like, "Oh, maybe it wasn't Helen Keller." So my wife, she could tell I'm confused. He's starting to be confused, but he just came in with such conviction, and it was awesome. So she's researching, who he could be talking about. Well, he was thinking Garrison Keillor, who was not Helen Keller, somebody totally different. We were laughing so hard. I'm like, so Garrison Keillor. So now, of course, I have to go find a biography on Garrison Keillor and learn who that is. So if I ever just in a conversation, if he comes up,
they always get mixed. They're always getting mixed up, those two. Helen Keller would have killed it on stage as a comedian for sure, though. I'm sure she would have been great.
Similar life stories. I mean, they're
very similar. Very similar, I'm sure.
But it was good. He got a great tip. We laughed so hard.
That is funny.
I'm going to give him the biggest tip. It was great. Anyways, there you go. There's our anniversary story.
That's great. Casey, welcome to the podcast. We're excited to have you. We've known Casey for a little while, and I know he does a lot of positive things in the community and really tries to help people. Does some motivational speaking. So we're excited to hear what you have to pitch to us. I don't know anything about this book. It's called The Impossible First by Colin O'Brady. I know nothing. So pitch away. I'm in the batter's box, ready to take a fast pitch, knuckleball. I don't know what you're pitching. Let's hear it.
All right, guys. Hey, I appreciate you having me on. I was super excited for this opportunity. So I got to tell you a little bit about the background of this book. I've obviously read a lot of books, motivational, business books, whatever. One day I was in the Dollar Tree, and as my kids were ransacking the place, I ran over by the books and I was just kind of going through them. And I saw this book called The Impossible First, and the subtitle is From Fire to Ice, Crossing Antarctica Alone. And I thought, I'm a pretty adventurous guy. I love to do hiking. I love outdoors. And so I thought, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll read that. And
for $1, you can't really go wrong, right?
I got it for $1 home, and I started reading it, and I could not put the thing down. And so I read the entire book, I think in about a day and a half. And I thought that was unbelievable. That was so incredible. So I went back to the Dollar Tree and bought every single copy that they had.
That's awesome.
I had my mom go to her Dollar Tree and look and see if they had them, and we've had a couple more copies. So at first I started just giving them away to people. I was like, "You've got to read this book. This is so incredible."
How many did you get your hands on?
I think I got my hands on about 9 or 10 books.
Okay, nice.
All done. I actually liked it so much that on my social media, I decided to do this sort of social media post of like, "Hey, what's your dream adventure, blah, blah, blah." And I had people give me answers, and I said, I'm going to pick 3 people, and 3 people are going to get a copy of this book. And so as I was going through that, getting down to choosing, I thought, how cool would it be if I reached out to the author and asked him to make a video of announcing who the winners were? And
wow.
shot for it. I threw a message out to Colin, and lo and behold, he answered me within, like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours. And he's
Awesome.
like, totally, I would love to do that. And so I gave him the names, and he made me a video, and he was just like, hey guys, this is Casey's giveaway, and here's the winners, and so
Awesome.
that's a cool thing. Once I read this book, I actually recognized him. There's a TV show, I want to say on BYU TV, and it's where I can't even remember the name of it, but they take like families and they do these adventure challenges against each other. I'll have to look up the name of it, but I remember watching 2 or 3 of those episodes, and I was like, oh, that's the guy. So to introduce Colin a little bit, he's a phenomenal individual. When he was in his young adulthood, him and his friends were over in, I want to say, Thailand, and he had an accident on the beach where they were doing like the flaming jump rope, and he went in and ended up catching on fire. And he was in the hospital over there. I can't remember if it was Thailand or Indonesia, but he was in the hospital for months. His mom had to fly over and stay with him. They basically told him he would never walk again normally, like he would always have issues. And he finally made it back to the States. And from that moment on, he just became a person that was very driven to go beyond the boundaries that anybody sets for him, or to take those boundaries away, and just anything was possible kind of attitude. And he became a really really good triathlete. Did a lot of races, that sort of thing. But what he's really known for now is the guy holds so many world records. This book, The Impossible First, is talking about him becoming the first person to ever travel across Antarctica, the entire landmass, not helped by anyone, just totally a solo trip.
Oh.
And so he started this pulling a 375-pound sled with all of his supplies on it.
Oh.
Right? You can imagine the terrain in Antarctica.
It sounds delightful.
Yeah, right. Sub-zero temperatures. He talked about at times when he couldn't even see in front of him. He'd have to hold his compass just like within inches of his face to even see if he was heading in the right direction. And then you have the terrain there where it's just jagged ice peaks and all that. And he had some experiences where he almost just lost it all, where his sled was tipping over, where his tent was like blowing away when he was trying to set it up. And nobody had ever done this feat. They had tried, but nobody had ever done it. And at the time he was doing it, there was another guy from Great Britain, I want to say, who was like a retired special forces, like military guy, who was trying to do the same thing. So it literally became a race between the two of them on different paths. And at times they saw each other. The first, they actually flew over in the plane together to Antarctica, and then they went on their ways. And there was a few times where they saw each other, but it's 100% unmanned. And so this whole thing was like a 932-mile expedition that took him just, I think, over 2 months in order to complete. So if you can imagine, he was out there for 2 months by himself, crossing the Antarctica. So as he's going through this story and just all of his experiences this is a story of endurance, mental, emotional, physical, everything. But he's also referencing his other world records that he's done. He also holds the world record for the Explorers Grand Slam, climbing all the 7 tallest summits on each continent, the 7 tall summits. He holds the record for climbing the highest peaks in every single state. He did that in like 21 days.
Wow.
And I remember one part of this book, he's talking about his girlfriend at the time, now his wife. She was kind of his master planner of all this. And I remember right after he climbed Mount Everest, he had just hit the top of Mount Everest. And she had told him when he got back down to, I can't remember which camp, but he got back down to one of the camps. And she said, hey, I figured out how you can set another world record. There's going to be a helicopter waiting for you at base camp that's going to take you to Kathmandu, and you're going to get on a plane instantly, and you have to fly to Alaska And once you get to Alaska, you're going to fly, or you're going to climb. Gosh, why did it just skip my
Denali?
mind?
Is it
Denali, yeah.
Denali? Yeah.
Yep. And so you're going to climb that, but what normally takes people, several days to weeks to climb, you need to do it in 2 days. And so
Wow.
summited Everest, got down, flew straight to Denali, climbed it in 2 days, came down. But so he holds the record of all these records. And then he decided to be the first person to ever rowboat across the Drake Passage from the tip of South America to the Antarctica, one of the most treacherous passes in the seas. And so he put together this little team, and they did it in a rowboat. And a couple of weeks ago, he's set out a new one, and he's going to try to ride a bike from California to, I believe, New Hampshire, clear across the United States, and do it in like some record-breaking time. I can't remember. They did a practice run of 1,000 miles a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
So
It's like not enough to just do the feat. Like anybody that climbs Everest, I have huge respect for, but all the 7 continents, record time. I mean, he's like trying to beat prior records and is doing it.
yeah, he's basically just trying to show that there is no limit to our potential, right? And that's what the whole book's about, is just like everyone has this potential inside of them. And he basically wanted to basically say there is no limits that you have. Like, you can do anything you want. And so it's just a very inspiring book that really like sparked something in me. I actually, from this, well, I'd already started, but once I read this book, it just like lit a fire. And so I've started putting together a program that I'm launching called 50 Epic Things. And what 50 Epic Things is it's every one of us, no matter what our age is, whether we're 89 or 8 or 9, male, female, whatever, we always have all these things we dream about. Like, oh, I would really like to do that, or that'd be cool, And we think about all these things, but a lot of times we just don't ever do them. And so I thought, what if you put together a list of 50 things that are epic to you? And so for mine, it might be, climbing to the top of a mountain, or going parasailing, or whatever it is, and finding 50 epic things. And for somebody else who maybe it's a grandma, and maybe she just wants to knit like 50 Afghans in a year or whatever, I don't know. But the goal is to make your list. And then there's an activity book that'll go with it to help journal through it, motivate you, keep track of things, put in action items for you to actually do things. And so for you to accomplish 50 epic things in 1 year, and how much that will change your life and kind of open you up to like anything's possible sort of attitude. And so the book was kind of key for that.
One of my favorite quotes, Casey, I'm curious on your thoughts, that when motivation ends, discipline begins. Oftentimes people, like you said, they'll feel motivated to act or to do something. Maybe it's to lose weight or to diet or whatever. Like, they want to start something, but then over time it kind of wanes. What do you think it is that, like Colin, for example, he's just been determined and disciplined through the process. How do people break past the motivation and keep that discipline going? Like, is it a mental thing? Is it a fear of failing? What do you think drives people to continue on?
You know what? I think part of it is having a plan, right? Like, actually having a plan, and maybe having a backup plan in case the first plan doesn't work. When I speak, I have an acronym that I created called ICU. ICU obviously stands for internal intensive care unit, where you apply intensive care to get out of the unit, sort of thing. But my acronym for ICU stands for identify, control, and unleash. And I think the first part is, I think people dream about things, but they don't truly identify with it. Like, they're like, oh, I would love to be able to, completely get in shape and, get ripped and all this, but you don't like identifying with it and making that your identity before you've even done it, right? That's a mental process. Like, you mentally that you are there already. Not I'm going to be someday, but that this is who I am. And maybe I don't look like it right now, but this is who I am. And I'm just It's part of the process, right? And so identify, and then understanding the control factor. Like I went through some pretty tough things in life to where a lot was taken, and I remember being at a point where I had to really get serious with myself as far as the identity part goes. And I realized at that time that I was spending about 90% focused on things I couldn't control. And so I had to make that mind switch. I'm like, okay, what are the simple little things that you can control and focus your efforts on those? And then the U is unleash, unleash your passion, unleash your drive, unleash your efforts and your focus, all that on those things, so that you can become that identity or that identifier that you put in place. And I think referencing another book, Atomic Habits, is understanding those little tiny things that we can actually control and do to completely change the outcome or completely change the trajectory of where we're headed or what we're trying to accomplish. So I think mental thing. I think it's a mental thing of like really truly identifying as that thing that you're trying to do.
I was going to ask 50 epic things. This question popped in my mind before you said in a year, and this made this question even crazier. How do you how they prioritize those things, right? Because that's about one a week. How do you, in other words, I guess you can't, I don't know. How do you prioritize what those epic things are, and how do you plan to do them? Have you thought through that?
Yeah, for sure. Like, for my list, like one of the things on my list is to read a book, every month, read a new book and really soak it in. Mm-hmm. So then, over the course of a year, I can do that every single day. That's one of my epic things. But my other one was like, another one on my list was learn how to truly surf, not try, but learn how to surf. That's one of the epic things on my list. That's something that, that takes some planning, right? I started in Hawaii, and I had a friend over there who's like busting my butt on the waves and trying to get me to figure this thing out. But that's gonna take, a couple, 2, 3, 4 trips. Who knows? That's especially when we're living in the middle of Utah. Exactly. And so that's got to be planned out. So yeah, it's something that has to be, definitely planned out, scheduled. And that's where that activity book is key, is like trying to plan out what are your action items to make all these things truly happen. So
gotcha. So one thing, Zach, I thought about on your question, have you guys heard of the Jerry Seinfeld method? For motivation?
Birds down to 7?
No, this is like if you want to do something consistently, you get a calendar and you just put an X through it if you did it on the calendar. And then as you start to see those X's add up, you don't want to let your calendar down. So that's one of the things that I've always thought was kind of cool, is that you just have a calendar and just mark it down and keep track of it. And that becomes your identity, right? These little small habits that you do, like we're talking about, just give you benefits over time, I guess. So
yeah. Well, you know what I think once you have them down and you know what they are, I believe that once you start thinking of those things, like you've probably heard of the in our brain we have the reticular activation system, the thing that, like, if you decide, for instance, if you decide you want to have a yellow Subaru, all of a sudden you're like, I'm going to go buy a yellow Subaru. All of a sudden you start seeing yellow Subarus around, or what. I think once we have that list down and we know what those things are that we truly want to accomplish, then the world has a way of like those things coming into our life. For instance, right after I made my list, one of the things on my list was, point of the mountain here in Utah, a lot of people hang glide there, right? Or paraglide. And I thought, you know what? I've never done that. I have no desire to jump out of a plane at all. No desire. But I would try that. I was like, that would be fun to me. I want to try that. And so that was one of the things on my list. And 2 days later, I get in an airplane, and I can't even remember where I'm flying to, but I sat next to this guy and we start talking. We find out that his cousin is a really good friend of mine from childhood, whatever. And as we're talking, I find out that he's probably the oldest instructor up there on Point of the Mountain. And
that's what you want, right?
I'm like, hey, I thought about that. And so by the end of the trip, we're like following each other on social media. We're texting each other over the weeks. And he's like, just let me know as soon as you want to come up and I'll get you up there. And so things start kind of just falling into place to make things happen when we open ourselves up to say, I can do this. I can actually go do this, and I want to do it, and the opportunities are gonna present themselves.
Cool.
So you did jump out of a plane.
No, no, no.
I would never do that either. Trust me. There's no way. No way.
I'm a bigger guy. I know I'm going to fall faster.
Exactly.
So
Awesome.
in this book, is there any examples? I mean, obviously it's one thing to write about your successes. I achieved this, I did that, I set all these records. Does he ever talk about, I tried this and I failed, or it didn't work and I had to keep going, or I had to change my game plan? Can you talk maybe a little bit about how he confronted some of those?
I'm trying to think of specific examples. Truth be told, it's been a while since I've read the book. And I'm trying to think of specific examples, but definitely he gives those examples about Everest and about the Antarctica and about multiple different things. But a couple things that kind of like stood out to me, one of them was, his sled at the first, they were very planned out of as far as what was going to go on the sled. They worked with nutritionists and came up with like a special bar that he could eat that didn't weigh much, that he could consume, get the calories he needed, and all that sort of thing. But his sled was much heavier than he anticipated or wanted it to be, and he realized that he had to shed a lot of weight at the very first. But then that put him in a predicament of like, I shed all this weight. What happens a month and a half into this, or towards the end, and I might need this stuff, and this is life or death. Like, there's no one. And so he had to make some real calculated decisions of how he was going to maneuver and how he was going to do things. But and that brought up another thought of mine is like, he talks about, and I might get this a little bit wrong, but he talks about the pendulum, and like how we have to experience ones in life, those disappointments in order to appreciate the tens when we hit them. Okay. We're going to have ones. We're going to have times where we bomb out, fall on our face, whatever. But that's what sets us up to really appreciate when we succeed and when we do the things we want to do and we make them happen. Then they become the tens. And so we can enjoy that a lot more, those experiences, and just thinking about his training, he had a trainer working with him. He was doing things where he had his hands and his feet in buckets of ice water, but having to put together, Legos or Rubik's Cubes. I can't remember exactly what he had to accomplish tasks, why he was going through these just frigid conditions where his hands wouldn't even work, and trying to figure it out so that when he was out there, he was ready for anything. And it's just incredible to hear and read about what he truly just went through. What I guess the heights that he pushed his body, his physical, limitations or limits, he just pushed beyond them. And it was really cool. Yeah.
Did he have a psych evaluation?
I'm probably self-evaluated.
What can you tell me more a little bit about the burns and him overcoming that? It sounds like that was a big challenge just to even get started to change his life. What do you remember much about that?
Yeah, I remember that when he was going through that, I believe it was his mom who basically pushed him to set a goal and say, what are you focused on? What do you want to do? And I think I remember that. I think it was a triathlon, if I remember right. And then once she got that dialed in on him, she just kept on that and kept pushing him to dream about it, think about it, be it, kind of going back to that identifier, like identify that that's who you are and that you're going to accomplish that. And that's what really helped him pull through that and kind of go beyond what the doctors ever thought he would. And he actually has a really cool second book that I've read as well, called the 12-Hour Walk. And that's something he came up with during COVID, I believe, but a super, super cool exercise. And I have actually got my spot picked. It's on my 50 epic things list to do this. But the thought process is you leave your house and you go walk for 12 hours straight without your earbuds in, without a telephone, nothing. It's just you inside your head, your thoughts, and how much that just unleashes the creative process, the thoughts, and just, all sorts of things with what you're dealing with in life. And I've decided that I can start at one end of the Bonneville Salt Flats, and I'm pretty sure I can walk to the other end and then back in 12 hours is my thought process. So that's where I'm going to try to accomplish that.
You said leaving the house without headphones and a phone, and I think I'm having a panic attack. So I don't know what's wrong with me right now, but not feeling very good. Just joking.
So when are you starting these 50 things, like your 50 epic things, and tell us a little bit about that.
I actually created an account to start tracking this, and I actually started back in February. Okay, but unfortunately, I went through a pretty tough year. I went through a divorce and trying to help kids through that and myself and all this sort of stuff. And so it kind of got backburnered. But in February is when I actually started, and I kicked it off in Hawaii with my surfing trip and that sort of thing. So now I'm to a point where I'm ready to really kick it off. Been through all that stuff, been through those ones in life.
Yeah.
And I was actually, I had a trip planned with a group out of Alaska to summit Mount Rainier last May, just this previous May. So I missed a few that I had scheduled, but I just put it all in the back burner. But now I'm to a point where I'm ready to launch it and really go after it. So it's stuff you'll like. I have a Instagram account called 50 Epic Things. And I'll be keeping track of it on there, and also on my personal Instagram called Herm for the World. Herm, the number 4, and then for the world. And so that's where I'll start keeping track of it, and you'll start seeing stuff on it.
That's awesome.
Man. We love it.
I can't wait to follow that.
Okay. Well, we really appreciate you coming on, Casey. And we'll definitely, with all the tens of followers that we have, we will promote those Instagram accounts, and you might get a follower or two out of that. So it's going to be a big deal here.
Once this is launched, I'll tag Colin in it and send it over to him.
Okay. Well, we appreciate Casey. Thanks for coming on. And again, the book is The Impossible First by Colin O'Brady. Casey Hermansen, we really appreciate you having you on here. Thanks for taking the time, and nice pitching there. We love it. You pitched a shutout. Well, I forgot to say, we always rate the book. Is it a single, home run? Is it a double, a triple, grand slam? What do you think that book is?
To me, it's a grand slam, right?
Okay.
He said, or actually called the Explorers Grand Slam. So
okay, there you go, grand slam. I'm going to Denny's right now to get a grand slam right at breakfast. So
right after the Dollar Tree.
Yes, yeah. I'm going to see if there's any at the Dollar Tree. All right, brother. We appreciate it.